The Pet Galaxy. In the heart of the Zalkari Empire, a sprawling alien dominion that spanned thousands of systems, humans were no more than pets. To the Zalkarians, a race of towering reptilian beings with glimmering obsidian scales and four luminous eyes, humans were considered exotic, emotionally unstable, and amusingly fragile. The Zalkari elite collected them like status symbols, showing off their well-behaved human companions during banquets and interstellar gatherings. Elise, a human girl in her early 20s, had been taken from Earth 2 years ago. She didn't remember the abduction clearly, just flashing lights, screams, and the horrifying realization that no one was coming to rescue her. Since then, she had been passed from one alien master to another until finally landing in the possession of Lord Kraxil, a high-ranking Zalkari noble known for his cruelty masked behind false civility. Lord Kraxil kept her in a luxurious glass chamber inside his floating palace above the clouds of Dronex Prime. The cell had everything she needed: food, clean clothes, a soft bed, but no freedom, no dignity, and no voice. She was not allowed to speak in the presence of Zalkarians unless asked. Any disobedience resulted in punishment. Not always physical, but always cruel. Her only light in this dark existence was Bruno. Bruno had been her dog on Earth, a big, strong German shepherd with sharp instincts and a gentleness reserved only for her. Somehow, miraculously, he had been taken along with her during the abduction. The Zalkarians found him amusing, calling him the little predator. To them, Bruno was just another part of Elise's novelty, a 2-for-1 pet deal. But Bruno was far more than a curiosity. He had never stopped protecting Elise. He slept near her bed, growled whenever a guard approached too close, and had even once bitten a Zalkari assistant who tried to force Elise to wear a demeaning costume for Lord Kraxil's party. Since then, Bruno had been kept under constant surveillance, but Elise refused to let them take him away. She had fought, screamed, cried, and for once, the noble had relented, perhaps amused by her desperation. Despite the humiliation, despite the constant fear Elise endured, she found solace in Bruno's presence, running her fingers through his fur during long, sleepless nights. He was her shield, her reminder of Earth, her only family. One evening, something felt different. Guards came earlier than usual. They weren't wearing their regular uniforms. These ones were in black, faceless armor. Elise noticed the stiffness in their movements, the way they avoided her eyes. She felt a coldness in her gut. Lord Kraxil appeared moments later, tall and dressed in a gleaming robe of shifting colors. His voice was oily with fake warmth. "Elise," he said, "today is a special day. You've been chosen for the Ascension trials." She didn't understand. Her mouth went dry. "What does that mean?" "It means," he smiled, showing rows of needle-like teeth, "you will serve a greater purpose now. You should feel honored." Before she could protest, the guards advanced. Bruno immediately positioned himself between Elise and them, teeth bared, a deep growl vibrating from his throat. His ears were high, muscles tensed, ready to attack. One of the guards raised a stun rod, but Kraxil waved his hand. "No, don't damage the specimen. We'll separate them later." "Specimen!" Elise screamed as they grabbed her. Bruno lunged, biting down on a guard's arm and dragging him to the ground. Another guard stunned Bruno, sending volts of energy through his body. He yelped in pain and collapsed. "No!" Elise thrashed against her captors, tears streaming from her eyes. "Don't hurt him, please." Kraxil looked at her with amusement. Such attachment. So quaint. She was dragged away, and the last thing she saw before the chamber door sealed shut was Bruno trying to rise, eyes locked on hers, full of fury and pain. What came next was a blur. She was taken deep into the palace, far from sunlight and windows, into a cold lab of metal and glass. Strange machines beeped. Alien scientists murmured. They strapped her to a chair and began preparing injections. Elise screamed, not from fear of pain, but fear of never seeing Bruno again. Meanwhile, back in the chamber, Bruno recovered faster than the guards expected. He limped at first, his body still tingling from the stun blast, but his senses were sharp. He could smell Elise's scent fading from the room, replaced by chemicals and fear. She was in danger. She was alone. And Bruno would not let her die. Bruno's instinct. Bruno paced restlessly across the chamber floor, his paws silent on the smooth, synthetic surface. The sting from the stun blast still lingered in his muscles, but he ignored the pain. His focus was entirely elsewhere. Elise was gone. He sniffed the ground, the walls, the air. Her scent trail was strong, chaotic. She had been scared, dragged, forced. He could smell the sharp ozone of stun rods, the unfamiliar chemicals of sterile hallways, and the cold metallic scent of the black armored guards. She was in danger. He didn't know what ascension trials meant, but he had seen enough in these alien halls to know that it wasn't good. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to act. Outside the chamber, two Zalcarian guards stood with weapons ready. From their perspective, the dog was a nuisance, maybe dangerous in bursts, but ultimately controllable. They laughed in guttural clicks, unaware that the creature behind the glass was watching their every move, every blink, every lapse in attention. Bruno crouched low. One of the guards yawned and turned to say something to the other. That was all he needed. In a blur of muscle and fury, Bruno launched himself at the door, smashing his full weight into the weak point between the wall and the control panel. Sparks flew. The security field fizzled, then dropped entirely. Alarms didn't sound. The system hadn't expected a pet to cause a breach. The guards barely had time to react before Bruno was on them. He bit down on the first one's throat, tearing through scaly skin. The second tried to raise his blaster, but Bruno slammed into him, sending the weapon skittering across the floor. With calculated ferocity, he disabled both within seconds. He didn't kill for sport. He killed because Elise needed him. He ran. The hallways of the floating palace were vast, curving tunnels of sleek black alloy and humming light. Bruno moved through them like a shadow, guided by scent and sound. He avoided patrols, ducked under scanning beams, and listened carefully for movement. This was more than intelligence. It was instinct sharpened by love. He followed Elise's scent down into the lower decks, where the air was colder and heavier. The walls here were different, thicker, lined with strange glyphs. The scent of blood and chemicals grew stronger. Then he heard it, a distant cry, her voice. Elise. His pace quickened. His heart pounded. He passed through a series of automated doors, his large frame barely triggering their motion sensors. One door, however, didn't open. It was sealed shut, heavy, reinforced. But Bruno didn't stop. He scratched, clawed, and slammed his body into the metal. A nearby panel sparked as he bit down on a loose cable, shorting the control circuit. The door creaked, then hissed open just enough for him to squeeze through. On the other side was a lab, cold, bright, and filled with horror. Elise was strapped to a vertical examination table, tubes in her arms, monitors beeping in strange tones. Around her stood three Zalcarian scientists in sterile white armor, poking and prodding, taking notes in their insect-like tongues. One of them noticed the movement. "What is that?" Bruno didn't wait. With a savage growl, he launched himself at the nearest scientist, knocking him into a wall with a sickening crunch. The others screamed in alarm, but it was too late. Bruno was a whirlwind of teeth and fury. He tore through armor like it was paper, leaping and twisting with precise strikes. They had never faced a threat like this, not from a pet. One scientist managed to activate a containment field. A pulsing wall of energy rose between Bruno and Elise, blocking his path. Bruno snarled, his teeth bared. Elise, weak and dazed, lifted her head. "Bruno," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The energy field shimmered. Bruno looked around. There, a power cable running along the wall. He ran toward it, ignoring the pain from his earlier wounds, and bit down hard. Sparks exploded. The field blinked, then vanished. Bruno rushed to Elise's side and stood protectively in front of her as backup security arrived. But this time, they hesitated. The lab was in shambles. 3 highly trained alien scientists were unconscious or dead. Blood stained the floor. And in the center of it all stood a dog, panting, growling, eyes glowing with a primal, unstoppable rage. For a moment, the Zalkarian soldiers didn't move. They had seen war. They had fought brutal enemies. But never had they seen a single earth creature do this much damage in so little time, all for one human. Elise reached out, trembling. Her hand touched Bruno's head. "You found me," she whispered. "Good boy." Bruno leaned in her touch, tail low but wagging slightly. Then he turned back to the soldiers. They raised their weapons. Bruno stood tall. The silence was broken by a new voice. Lord Craxhill had arrived. He looked around the ruined lab, his calm facade cracking. His eyes locked onto Elise, then Bruno. "I underestimated you," he said coldly. Bruno growled. Craxhill raised a hand, and the soldiers lowered their weapons. "This one is no ordinary pet," he muttered. "He's something else." Elise, still weak, smiled through the pain. "He's not a pet. He's my family." And in that moment, something shifted. Even among the Zalkarians, something primal stirred. A realization that love, loyalty, and fury weren't limited to their kind. Sometimes the smallest threat carried the deadliest bite. Death has four legs. The halls of the Zalkari research sector were in chaos. Security alarms blared. Sirens echoed through the walls. High-priority alerts flashed across communication panels. But none of it stopped the silent storm that stalked through the corridors. A wounded, enraged German shepherd named Bruno. Elise leaned against his side, barely able to walk on her own. Blood trickled from a needle mark on her arm, her face pale. Yet even in her weakened state, she kept moving because Bruno kept moving. He guided her with slow, steady steps through the labyrinth of cold metal, snarling at every sound, sniffing at every intersection, always leading her away from danger. But the Zalkari Empire did not accept failure. A voice crackled through the facility's intercom. Lord Craxhill's voice, now devoid of amusement. "Seal off Sector 7. Engage all containment units. I want the creature and the girl captured alive, or their bodies retrieved for study." Bruno froze mid-step. He looked up. He could sense it. A hunt was coming. He nudged Elise gently, pressing her against a wall near an air duct. She blinked at him, confused. "You want me to hide?" she whispered. He gave a low grunt, then stepped away. "No, Bruno, no. I'm not leaving you again." But he was already moving. He darted into the open corridor, drawing attention to himself. Within seconds, armed guards turned the corner, and Bruno ran straight at them. The first blast from their weapons missed. The second struck Bruno's side, burning his fur and skin. He didn't slow. He leapt, jaws open, and clamped down on the arm of the nearest guard. The alien shrieked in pain as Bruno twisted and ripped the weapon free. Another guard fired. Bruno spun around, grabbed the fallen blaster in his teeth, and threw it across the hall, disarming the second enemy with unexpected precision. Then he charged again. He wasn't fighting like a dog. He was fighting like a soldier. Blood sprayed across the silver walls as Bruno tore through the squad with a terrifying mixture of calculated strikes and sheer fury. These weren't random attacks. Bruno targeted their weak points. Joints, exposed veins, sensitive alien organs. He moved like he had studied them, like he understood them. One by one, they fell. The last guard tried to crawl away. Bruno didn't kill him. He let him live, shaking, trembling, wounded. A message. In the shadows, Elise watched wide-eyed. She had never seen Bruno like this before, not even on Earth. It was as if something ancient had awakened inside him, something that slept inside all protectors where their family was in danger. She whispered, "You're not just a dog anymore, are you?" Bruno returned to her side, limping slightly but alert. He pressed his nose to her hand, then nudged her forward. They weren't safe yet. Suddenly, the walls shuddered. A heavy mechanical thud echoed through the sector. Then came the real threat. Out of the far end of the corridor, a massive security unit emerged. A cybernetic beast 10 feet tall, with razor-sharp limbs and glowing red sensors. It was a prototype Zalkari war machine, designed to neutralize rogue biological threats. Target identified. Threat level, class red. Directives Eliminate. Bruno growled, lowering his body, tail stiff. Elise backed away, her voice trembling. No, Bruno, we have to run. But Bruno stood his ground. The machine charged. Bruno met it head-on. He dodged the first blade, then bit into a joint near the creature's neck. Sparks flew as he ripped out a bundle of wires. The machine shrieked and spun, trying to slam him against the wall. Bruno rolled underneath, avoiding the blow by inches. He leapt onto its back, claws digging into steel plating. The machine bucked and twisted, slamming into the walls and floor, trying to throw him off. Elise screamed as Bruno was thrown across the hall. He hit the wall hard. Blood dripped from his mouth. The machine advanced, calculating the kill. Bruno's eyes narrowed. He stood up slowly, his body trembling with exhaustion and pain. Then, from behind the broken panel he had chewed earlier, he saw a spark. The central control relay, exposed in the chaos. He had one shot. Bruno sprinted forward with everything he had left. The machine lunged to intercept, but Bruno feinted, then launched himself straight toward the exposed relay. His teeth sank in. Electricity surged through him. The machine screamed, then exploded. Flames burst outward, smoke filling the hall. The shock wave knocked Elise down. When the dust settled, all that remained was the charred husk of the war beast, and in front of it, Bruno, barely breathing, lying motionless on the floor. Bruno! Elise crawled to him, tears falling freely. Please, please, no. She placed her hand on his chest. A faint heartbeat. Still alive. She laughed through her sobs. Good boy, you're okay. Behind her, alarms went silent. The system was down. The war machine destroyed. The guards defeated. And across the entire Zalkari network, something strange happened. Footage from the lab had been recorded. Cameras had captured everything. Bruno's fury, his intelligence, his sacrifice. Zalkarian nobles watched in disbelief as a single Earth dog brought down an entire squad and a war unit for the sake of one human. The myth of human weakness shattered. All across the stars, whispers began to spread. This was not a pet. This was a protector. This was death with 4 legs. The rise of the Bond. Silence spread like a virus through the Imperial fleet above the Zalkari homeworld. Every screen aboard command ships, military stations, and diplomatic embassies had played the footage, the brutal, awe-inspiring display of a single Earth canine protecting its human at all costs. The Zalkari High Council, once arrogant and cold, now sat in quiet horror. Their belief that humans were docile, harmless creatures, bred only for amusement and servitude, had been ripped apart in under an hour. And Bruno, injured, burned, barely able to stand, had become a legend. But he was still not safe. Back in the dark halls of the facility, Elise cradled Bruno's head in her lap. His eyes flickered open, dull but aware. You saved me, she whispered, stroking his fur gently. He tried to lift his head, but she stopped him. No rest. You did enough. Footsteps echoed in the corridor. Elise looked up. Lord Craxel stood before them, flanked by 2 elite guards. His expression was unreadable. She stood between them and Bruno. If you try to touch him, I swear I'll. Silence, Craxel said softly, raising a clawed hand. He stepped closer and knelt. To think, he muttered, we call them pets. Tools. Entertainment. Elise narrowed her eyes. You tortured us. Yes, and for that, the Empire will answer. He looked to his guards. Stand down. They hesitated. My lord. I said stand down. Weapons lowered. For the first time, the guards looked not at Elise or Bruno with disdain, but with something closer to respect or fear. Craxel spoke again, quieter this time. The council has seen what happened here. The footage is everywhere. We cannot erase it. And now, they fear what humans might become if bonded to creatures like this. Elise's voice trembled. He's not a weapon. I know. He's something far worse. Craxel's eyes met hers. He's loyal. And loyalty, real loyalty, terrifies us. He stood. The galaxy is watching, girl. And many are asking, if one dog can do this for one human, what happens if 1,000 rise together? A deep silence passed between them. Then Elise said, firm and clear, "Then the galaxy should be very careful who it chains." News of the protector dog spread like wildfire through the galactic networks. Worlds under Zalkari control began to question the treatment of their human companions. Underground groups formed, not just of humans, but of aliens too, moved by the story of Bruno's sacrifice. Whispers of resistance gained strength. They called it the Bonded. On Earth, where humans had once been abducted for entertainment, a movement surged. Families adopted and trained dogs with new purpose. Not just as pets, but as guardians, companions, defenders. They remembered Bruno. Statues were built in his honor, his image etched into the history books of species once enslaved, now awakening. And somewhere, aboard a stolen Zalkari transport ship drifting through hyperspace, Elise sat beside Bruno as he lay in a medical pod, recovering. "You changed everything," she whispered. His ears twitched. His eyes opened slowly. A weak wag of the tail. She smiled. They were heading to a secret colony now, one that would welcome humans and their companions as equals. A place where Bruno could heal, where Elise could train others, and where stories of their defiance would inspire a new future. A soft chime rang from the ship's console. A message. Encrypted. Anonymous. Elise tapped the screen. "You don't know us, but we saw what happened. We are many, and we are ready. When the time comes, call on us. For the bond is real, and it will rise." Elise leaned back in her chair, glancing at Bruno. "Looks like they've finally started listening." Bruno gave a low, approving growl. The screen faded to black, and so began a new chapter, not just for Elise and Bruno, but for every being in the galaxy who had ever been underestimated, silenced, or enslaved. Because love, loyalty, and sacrifice are not weaknesses. They are revolutions waiting to happen.